What is going on, ladies, gentlemen, listeners of the Didn't Ask podcast? Welcome back to another episode of this right here podcast, the Didn't Ask podcast. How's everybody doing? Hope you had a good time. Hope you had a good weekend. I am coming to you a little bit earlier, not for you, but for me. I'm recording this on a Sunday morning, afternoon, actually. It's almost 1 o'clock. And normally I would do this on Monday, sometimes even Tuesday. But yeah, it's going to be a very busy week, because I'm going to be signing to the company I was working with for the couple months, the year and a half, the past year and a half, because I've been freelancing for them constantly, and they were just like, hey, would you want to just work at our company, just be a full-on employee? And I was like, well, that sounds awesome, because it gives you a whole bunch of benefits, and that's just really nice to don't have to deal with all the taxes and the payments and stuff like that. Everything is going to be a lot more smooth, even though I have to say, they have been a fantastic company to work with. Again, that's why I'm going to be there, like, quote unquote, full time. But yeah, they've been a fantastic partner, and I've never have to wait a long time for my money and stuff like that. Everything has been totally smooth operating. So I'm very happy to be joining their crew of people and be there as like a full-on employee, and that's going to be really fun. But that meant that I had to move up the recording of the podcast just a couple of fucking days, because man, it's been very busy, and it's going to be even busier the couple of weeks. So hopefully, you know what, I wanted to make this sure that I was recording this podcast, so here we are. We are a little bit earlier, but that doesn't really matter to you, because you're gonna just get it on the same day anyways. Other than that, I've just finished watching NXT Vengeance Day, and oh my, that was a really fun card altogether. We basically knew who the winners of each match was going to be, but it was really fun to have NXT finally leave their borders, so to speak, of the Performance Center and go to Charlotte, North Carolina, where, of course, big Charlotte fan, the person Charlotte, who's named after Charlotte, North Carolina. And of course, Charlotte was part of the intro, so that was fun too. And yeah, like, it was a great card altogether from top to bottom. Again, very much knew who was going to win each match, but it didn't really matter to me. It's really much about this, in this case, very much so. It's about the journey. It's how do we get to the end point, and how do they do it? And it was fantastic. And I've seen people say this online, that JC Jane was really a standout, and man, I have had a crush on JC Jane since she started with Toxic Attraction, and to see her get some more credit, that's very, very heartwarming to me, because she has been working her ass off, and she has been looking very fucking good all this time, and now this is finally a time where she was like, hey, this is my time to shine. She hasn't to deal with any of the tag team bullshit, nothing to do with Toxic Attraction as a whole, so she could shine and show that she isn't the weak link, and that there isn't really a weak link in the Toxic Attraction family or faction, whatever the fuck you want to call it. You know, even though we don't have Mandy Rose anymore, because she wanted to do porn and stuff like that, so good for her, very good for her. But yeah, this is not where I talk to you about NXT, even though I would love to go through the card one by one, but maybe that will be something to do for another time. This is the podcast where I talk to you about the most asked questions of Reddit, and I will jump into the first question coming from the Ask Reddit subreddit for today, coming from user, I should ride right now. Ooh. Sometimes when the usernames are very long, basically like a sentence, I always get fucked up when, like, his name is I should ride right now, and it's like, okay, so I should, which also could be is who, you know what I mean? It always stumbles me out, but who gives a crap? If you go back to a time for a day to witness a historic event, which would you choose? There are so many fun events that you could go back to and think like, oh my god, how the fuck did they do that? Or I wish I would, was going to be there. And to me, as a wrestling fan, I would say WrestleMania 29 in New York. I think that was a big one, because that was the one where they had The Rock versus John Cena, and they had a build from like a year that they built up towards that match. And there were so many fun other matches on the card. We had, of course, from the top of my head, Fandango beating Chris Jericho in his debut match, which was absolutely fantastic. I was a big Fandango guy when Dango was still around. I really like Chris Jericho too, don't get me wrong. Liked Chris Jericho. I don't like Chris Jericho as much in the lately. But yeah, Chris Jericho is one of these people that I'm just like, wow, how the fuck is this motherfucker still around and still doing so well? And he's like TNT champion right now or something like that. It's fucking crazy to me. Or is he Ring of Honor? I don't know. Anyways, he's a champion and doing very well. We of course also had, again, I'm doing this from the top of my head, so don't get me wrong. So correct me if I'm wrong, but please don't, because I'm doing this from the top of my head. We also had CM Punk versus Undertaker, which is of course a fantastic match. That happening, that build as well was so fucking good. Building towards like because that was the year that Paul Bearer died, I believe. So CM Punk holding the urn that normally Undertaker would hold, but then this was the urn of Paul Bearer. That was fucking crazy. So that is a thing that I'm thinking about right now. What am I thinking about? Something else. No, I mean, those 3 matches I think are already worth it for me for WrestleMania. Another thing that I would love to go back to if I got the chance. It's a very interesting day. I'm thinking, but I don't really know what other date I would like to go back to. No, I'm totally blanking right now. So going back to the question asked by I Should right now, if you could go back in time for a day to witness an historic event, which would you choose? And I think I would go back to WrestleMania 29 to witness that fucking card, because that was a fucking amazing card. From what I can remember, the crowd was out fucking standing. And then of course you had the Rock Cena match that they have been building for a year. We had the CM Punk Undertaker match, which was crazy. And then we had the debut of Fandango beating Chris Jericho. All fucking crazy things that happened. And I think that those will be very memorable to see live. So that would be my answer to you. I should right now. And now moving on to the second question of today, coming from user Red Shia 1080. So that is 1080, I guess. Who is the most overrated musician? I think that there are a couple overrated musicians in history. In my head, I was thinking Beyonce. Like, Beyonce has really good songs, but overall, I just don't think that it's really hard because music is very subjective, and we all know this, right? Music is very subjective. Some people like R&B, some people like hip hop, other people like something else. I personally am more into like the vocal stuff, so I love my Taylor Swift. Big fan of Tori Kelly. Love my Sabrina Carpenter and stuff like that. And to me, Beyonce just doesn't hit on the same level. And again, I respect Beyonce for all the shit she's done. She has great fucking songs and she has some good bops. But to me, it's just like, oh man, it just doesn't work for me, right? So I think that there are so many other people that are better in many ways. And again, Tori Kelly, please, there are legitimately videos on her by vocal coaches and voice coaches and stuff like that analyze how she sings and are so impressed by her, because believe me, Tori Kelly is so fucking good. She is incredible. The way that she manipulates her voice, it's fucking crazy. So again, when I compare that to other people, that I'm just like, what have you done for me lately? And especially the last album that Beyonce released, I was just like, well, these are just dance songs. Like, what are we doing here, man? This is not what we want. At least that's not what I want from Beyonce. And I have a similar thing right now with Usher, who I loved as a kid, and all the R&B songs. And he, of course, started going to more like a dancey side with like, oh my God, and stuff like that. And I don't want to say he's overrated, but like I feel like we have an issue with nostalgia, right? Where people go like, oh, fucking Chris Brown. I loved Chris Brown as a kid, but Chris Brown hasn't been doing interesting stuff in my opinion. And that goes for Beyonce, it goes for Usher. While I love these artists, apart from Chris Brown, because Chris Brown could go fuck himself, I think that there are so many things that are really highly rated when I'm just like, I don't really think that is the way we should be looking at these people. And then again, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I think that the Beatles are very overrated. I don't think that their music is very good. And they had the benefit of being in a time where the music world was very closed off and there was not very much, the world wasn't globalized as it is right now, right? So the way that they broke through was very good because they were, part of the time, and that's how they broke through. But again, looking back now, I'm just like, okay, well, what? This is it? Fucking when the song submarine, like, to me, it just sounds like absolute garbage. But again, it's very subjective. So on that topic, I looked through the comments of this, and some people were saying Drake, and I think that Drake is also a very good thing because Drake is very good at he's the pretty boy, right? He's like the nice guy the girls like and the guys want to be because the girls like him. But overall, yeah, I think that he has some good songs and some fun songs, but overall, I think that he just uses people around him to get to places where he wants to be, and that is, how this industry works, is how entertainment business works. You use as much of an advantage as you can get to the place you want to be, right? But overall, yeah, I think that he is not the greatest artist, and like, honestly, and this is the times we live in now, where it's just like, with the fact that we have such an interesting way of discovering music nowadays, where it's like people discover music on TikTok and on Instagram and stuff like that because people use them in reels and in TikToks, and therefore I feel very disconnected to those artists because I follow the artists that I follow, like a KSI, like an Emery, like a Tori Kelly, like a Jess Glynn, like a Taylor Swift. Those are the artists I follow, and therefore I know what they're doing. But I don't follow Drake and I don't follow Beyonce, so I don't really understand what they're doing because we don't really have like radios as we used to, right? Where you would listen to the top 40 and that's the top 40, so that's the songs you hear every fucking day. We don't really have that anymore. We now go to, again, you go to YouTube or you go to or Spotify or something like that, and it legitimately curates a list of shit that you listen to and then dives deeper into that catalog and basically, for the most part, shuts out everything around that. So for me, if I go to my YouTube Music, because I use YouTube Music, I press play on a random, or like not a random song, but like on a song I like, and then it just goes like, oh, you like Anne-Marie, so put some Anne-Marie in there, and Anne-Marie has a song with Little Mix, and I like a Little Mix as well, so puts more Little Mix in there. So it's a really hard thing for me to say that, oh, this person is overrated, this person is underrated. But yeah, if I zoom out, I would agree with the Drake thing, where it's just like, yeah, Drake has some good songs, but overall I think he's very mediocre. He just uses media very, very wisely. And of course, it helped that he was on Degrassi and got some fandom from that. But yeah, overall, I think that he is a very overrated musician. And then again, to me, Beyonce also has fallen off. I wouldn't say that she's overrated, but she has fallen off, similar to like a Chris Brown and an Usher, who just went in a different direction, which I don't think is a great choice for them. Thank you for your question, Red Chia 1080. Moving on to the third question of today, coming from user Mr. McFearless, and they ask, what cover song is actually better than the original? I would say, what is it? Can't Hurry Love? Or Hurry Love, whatever the fuck it is, that Phil Collins sang. You Can't Hurry Love by Phil Collins, who was, of course, a song by the Supremes originally, but which it's still a good song, don't get me wrong, the Supreme song, but I feel like the Phil Collins version is just slightly better, and it always, it also is always really hard for me when it's just like, the song is originally sung by black people, none of the least Diana Ross. So for me, it sounds hard when it's just like, it's a song sang by black people, and then there's a white guy that sang it better. So that's really hard for me to say, but I personally like the Phil Collins version a little bit better. I also think that the Phil Collins version also did way better in the top 40 and stuff like that, and therefore we have more, I guess, nostalgia, similar to like the previous question. We have more of a bond with that song because we know it and we have seen it so much and heard it so much. So I think that is why I would go for that. Are there any other cover songs that I can think of that I'm just like, oh, that's real good? There are some Dutch songs that have been covered because we have a show called The Best Singers, and then they sing each other's songs and then they reimagine it and stuff like that. And there are some of the songs on there that are really good, but one in particular, but I don't want to give that person attention, so I'm not going to mention them. Anything else? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I know I've talked about this just now about Tori Kelly, but Tori Kelly did a whole bunch of covers on her YouTube channel, and some of them are really fucking good. But I honestly cannot come to think of any songs right now that I'm just like, oh, that's a fucking perfect song. That is the, especially because I feel nowadays we don't really do covers anymore, and we just sample, and then people like reimagine the song. Or speaking again of Tori Kelly, where she did a song with Amy Grant, and Amy Grant was, of course, famous for the song Baby Baby. And then she did a collaboration with Tori Kelly to basically like reimagine the song. And that fucking song is absolutely fantastic. So if you know it, then fucking, if you know Baby Baby by Amy Grant, go listen to this song because it's fucking fantastic. But again, it's just Tori Kelly, who's such an amazing vocalist and can smash everything out of the park. So that would be a kind of my answer, I guess, because even though it's not really a cover, because it's like a collaboration and like a reimagining, but it's up there for me. So going back to the question asked by user Mr. McFearless, what cover song is actually better than the original? And I would say Can't Hurry Love by Phil Collins is, in my opinion, a little bit better and more modern, I guess, as well, than the original song by the Supremes. But again, I say that with pain in my heart because it feels like I'm putting down black people, and that's not what I want to do. And then I'm going to give a Joker answer, and that is Tori Kelly, Amy Grant, Baby Baby, even though it's not really a cover, it's more like a collaboration reimagination, but it's somewhat a cover, I guess. If we squint our eyes very much so. Thank you for your question, Mr. McFearless. Moving on to the fourth question of the day, coming from the user Girl Amy, and that is AMI. Girl am I? Kan ook nog. That's also possible. Girl am I? I don't know. I think it's Girl Amy. Would you change your job to a bread baker if it paid double your current wage and you'd get training for it? Why or why not? Like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I just agreed to a contract with the company I'm working at, and I'm getting nicely paid for it. In my opinion, I think it is very well a nice wage. So going to that, saying like, oh, do I want to become a bread baker? Like, baking bread has never, been my dream, but I really love baking, and my grandpa was also like a pastry chef, so stuff like that. So it has always been something that has been very close to me and very personal to me. So would I change my job if it doubled the wage? Yeah, probably. I think that the only thing that I'm very hesitant about is the fact that if you're a bread baker, you need to be fucking breaking bread at like 3 a.m. And that's the only thing that I'm a little bit hesitant about, where it's just like, oh, guys, why the fuck do I need to wake up at 2 and then, start breaking bread at 3? But overall, I think that, I wouldn't mind. I think that baking bread is like a noble thing to do, even though we don't really go to bakeries anymore and to stuff like that to get bread. Because normally speaking, I would just go to like a grocery store and do it there. But I think that baking bread is such a, again, noble thing to do. It's very much for the people, especially bread. So yeah, if I'm gonna get paid like $5,000 a fucking month to do that shit, I think I'm start thinking about it. Definitely, and I probably would agree if I can make double the money that I'm making now. That, especially in today's society and today's economics, man, that's gonna help me tremendously and be such a very nice thing to just have so much money so that you can fucking buy a house that is fucking impossible because you're gonna be paying fucking mortgages out of the fucking ass, or even rent a house, which has been fucking insane here as well, where like the average wage here is like $3,000 or something like that. I'm gonna look it up right now. So the average wage is around $3,000. Yeah. So that's the average net monthly salary is $3,000. Think about the fact that there are houses for rent right now that are like 2 or maybe 3 bedroom. Yeah, mostly 2 bedroom apartments, I think, that are on rent right now for like $1,500 a month. And that is just renting the property. So that's no water, no electricity, no heating, nothing like that. And your average is like $3,000. That is fucking insane to me. Like, how the fuck is that a thing that we have to pay rent like half the money that you're getting paid, more than that maybe, is going up to rent? That's fucking crazy to me. So yeah, making $5,000 a month breaking bread is gonna be a very nice thing to do. So going back to the question asked by user Girl Amy, would you change your job to a bread baker if it paid double your current wage and you'd get training for it? Why or why not? I would say yeah. Today's economics are fucked up and you need that fucking money and you need to get that bread. So being a bread baker would be a very cool thing to do. And again, baking bread or baking as a whole has been very close to me. And I think that is a really fun job to do. And again, very noble. So yeah, probably I would. Thanks for the question, Girl Amy. Moving on to the final question coming from the Ask Reddit for today, asked by user New Horizons 8231. Who would be the worst actor to play the next James Bond? And I'm gonna say Vin Diesel. I think that Vin Diesel is such a fun actor for the movies that he's doing, like the Riddicks and the Fast and Furious. But seeing him as James Bond is gonna be so fucking laughable. And we have so many good options for James Bond right now. We have Henry Cavill, who has always been touted as James Bond. And recently we got Aaron Taylor Johnson, right? Aaron Taylor Johnson, yeah, who has been rumored to become the next James Bond, and apparently has talks with the Broccoli family. So those are very good options in my opinion. So especially if Vin Diesel would just swerve in at that point, that would have found it hilarious, especially because of course Vin Diesel is the complete opposite of British and James Bond has always been British. So changing that up would be a very big shock. So yeah, I would say that is one of the worst options that you can pick. To you, New Horizons 8231. Thank you for your question. And now moving on to the final question of today, coming from the Am I the Asshole subreddit, asked by user Leatherhead Material 93. Am I the asshole for moving out when my parents asked me to pay rent? I, a 20-year-old, am the oldest of 5 siblings and I am a full-time student. I also have a part-time job in my field, but when I complete my after degree, my employer will take me on full-time. I make enough for my part-time job to pay for school and put money aside. My siblings are from 20 to 10. Both of my parents work full-time. I have taken on a lot of responsibilities for keeping everything running in the house. I do grocery shopping, the laundry, as well as making suppers and doing meal prep so everyone has lunches ready to take every day. I also get all my siblings to do their part with regards to the household chores. For example, my youngest brother is responsible for feeding and walking the dogs, so I make sure that there is dog food in the storage and poop bags on the leash. My dad works very long hours and my mom works 9 to 5 at a hard job. Over Christmas, I had a chance to buy a PS5 for myself, so I did. The rest of my family is still using a shared PS4. I keep mine in my room and I do not share. My parents started fielding complaints from my oldest brother about how I made so much money and don't share the things I buy for myself. Totally true. So they had a talk with me where they brought this up. I pointed out how much of the household work I did and they said it wasn't fair that I was earning so much money without contributing. They told me how much they expected from me. I went to my room and did the math. If I gave them what they wanted, I would have about $800 a month left over. If I dropped a couple of classes next semester, I could go to almost full-time hours with my employer, and it would only be one more year until I graduated with my second degree. But I could afford my own place and I would have way more free time and disposable income. I packed up and moved out. Everything I owned fit in my car. I stayed at an Airbnb for 2 weeks until I could get everything sorted with an apartment, school, and work. It was great. I'm not going to lie, I may have gone a little overboard on Tinder. I couldn't have women over to my parents' house. I just moved into my own apartment. I'm staying part-time until I finish this semester. I will work full-time over the summer and go to a lighter class load, higher work hour in the fall. My oldest brother has been tasked by my parents to do everything I used to. His chores have been split up with the other 3. They are all pissed at me for moving out. My parents are upset that I left them in the lurch. My siblings are mad that they all have more chores. My oldest brother is especially salty because he has no free time to see his girlfriend and she isn't allowed in the house when my parents aren't home. I'm enjoying my free time. I bought myself a plant from IKEA. I feel bad for screwing them all over, but it didn't make sense for me to do all the work and pay rent on top. Am I the asshole? I would say, no, you're not the asshole. You did the smart thing and looked at your finances and was just like, well, if I have to pay rent, I'd rather just pay rent for myself and just be done with everything. And I feel like that's a very smart thing to do. Does it come off as that you are the asshole? Maybe a little bit, because it seemed like you really left in a hurry and that you weren't talking to anybody about it. So I can understand the backlash that you've gotten from this. But overall, I would say, no, you're definitely not the asshole. You looked at what was good for you and you decided to choose yourself and split. Legitimately, you just were like, fuck this, I'm gonna go. I don't need this, so I'm just gonna go. So I would say, you became an adult, right? You became an adult very quickly when you realized, hey, I am contributing to this household and now you're asking me for money, which, to be very fair to your parents, I get that they are starting to ask for money because that is how that works, right? When you live there and you start making your money. But the fact that you are doing chores, you're doing the grocery shopping and stuff like that, I think that is a fair point to be just like, hey, I am doing my part. I'm making sure that everything is running smoothly and that everybody has food and stuff on the table. And now you're asking me to pay rent as well. Like, come on, dude. And if your parents didn't want to deal with that, then then I feel like you're in the right mind to just say, hey, motherfuckers, thanks for everything, but at this point, I'm just out. I'm sorry, but this is just what it is. And I am now 23. I'm my own person and I can just do this for myself. So, going back to the question asked by user Letterhead Material 393, am I the asshole for moving out when my parents asked me to pay rent? Definitely not. Maybe again, this is what it comes down to with I'm the assholes. Like, maybe people need to think things through, not necessarily to halt it, but just to be like, okay, let's talk to people and be like, okay, this is what's going to happen, and give them a little bit more time to anticipate it. But you're 23, you're your own person, and you can clearly pay for shit yourself. So you're definitely not the asshole. And that's going to do it for the Didn't Ask podcast for this week. I hope you had a good time. And if you did, please leave a rating on Apple Podcast and Spotify, because both places give you the ability to leave a rating. You can find this podcast on all the podcast platforms around the world. But you can also go to anchor.fm/didn't-ask-pod. That link will be in the show description. Over here, you can have an overview of all the podcast services the podcast is available on, like Pocket like Spotify, Jesus Christ, like Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, Podcast Addict. It's fucking there. If it's not, let me know. You can do that by going to that anchor.fm website mentioned earlier and pressing the message button on top of the page. You can also use that button to record a voice message asking me a personal question for me to answer on this right here podcast. If you don't want your voice to be heard on this right here show, just say it somewhere in your message and then I'll read your message out myself so you can get your question answered, but stay anonymous while doing so. I will be back next week. And in the meantime, and in between time, you can go to track.tv. Over here, you can have an overview of all the TV shows and movies that I'm watching. Sometimes even while I'm watching them, I am going through The Legends of Vox Machina, really enjoying that. I'm watching Velma, not really enjoying that. I am doing still Below Deck because there's so much Below Deck to watch and it's fucking fantastic. And of course, The Last of Us is going strong and episode 3 was absolutely fantastic. So go over there to track.tv and see all the shows that I'm watching because it's quite a bit. Well, that's going to do it for me for now. I hope you had a good time and I hope to see you back next week. Thanks for listening and goodbye.